Well, good morning and welcome to EV Brief Podcast. And today we're joined by Dan Bleakley, whose videos of coal miners in Teslas have been doing the rounds on the internet recently. Dan, thanks so much for joining me today.
Great, thanks for having me, Jonathan. I really appreciate it.
Well, look, your videos showing everyday Aussies experiencing a Tesla for the first time have gone global. Can you tell us a little bit about the concept behind coal miners in Teslas?
So I've been a climate activist for a couple of years. My background's in engineering, and I grew up in a small mining town in central Queensland. And I've been an EV owner for 2 years. I have a Tesla Model 3 Performance. And a few weeks ago, I was coming up to my hometown for a holiday to visit family. And my brother, he works at a coal mine and took the car over to work for a week, and he took some of his mates for a drive and filmed their reactions, and we posted it online, and kind of went viral. And then we thought, wow, we could be onto something really good here. And now we're up to about 21 episodes where we basically take regular Aussies, coal miners, or people in regional Australia for their first drive of a high-performance electric vehicle.
And Bob Katter, the man himself, for those who don't know, he's an outspoken politician who's quite famous for some of his gaffes and some of the things he said. But I like the fact that you just you let him drive it, and it wasn't about pushing a political point or an agenda. It's just about experiencing the technology.
Yeah, exactly. My friend who I'm staying with in Mackay, he suggested trying to get Bob Katter to take it for a drive. So put a tweet out a few days later and said, if Bob's keen for a drive, I'll dead set drive it from Clermont up to Charters Towers to let him have a go. And yeah, his staff reached out to me a few days later, and we made it happen. So from Clermont to Charters Towers is about 370 kilometers.
Yep.
And I got there, I didn't have a full charge when I left. I got there with about 13 kilometers left on the battery, and then charged it overnight just with the cable running into my hotel room. But yeah, Bob was fantastic. I spent about 3 hours with him, and he really loved the car. And you can tell that from the videos. And I think it opened up the space for conversations about other clean tech opportunities for Australia.
Yeah, and that's the brilliant thing behind what you've created, I think, because a lot of people, myself included, in the EV space and clean tech space, you get caught up in the policy and the technical stuff, but sometimes you just got to show people what the technology can do and how it can change things, don't you? And this is exactly what you've done.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
They say it's all about bums in seats, and it's so true. It's like if you try to explain to someone what it's like to ride a roller coaster, they're never going to truly understand what it feels like until they actually do it. And it's the same with a fast accelerating electric vehicle as well. You can try to write about it or speak about it as much as you can, but you're not going to effectively communicate how good it is until you put people into the car. I'm really, it's really opened my eyes as far as the opportunities that this now could bring for the electric vehicle movement.
Yeah, totally. I think this kind of advocacy space is big with EVs, and as you say, it's about bums in seats. Tell us a little bit about your trip up there. Like, how far did you travel in the Model 3 to get back to your hometown?
Yeah, so I live in Melbourne now, and so I drove from Melbourne up to Clermont, and the drive was fantastic. I was stopping at the Tesla supercharging stations the whole way.
Yeah.
All the way up to Gympie.
Yeah.
Which is just north of Brisbane. That's where the last Tesla supercharging station is. And I don't know how many of your listeners are Tesla owners, but when you type in on the screen, when you type in your destination, it routes you through all the charging stations.
Yep.
So it was really easy. it told me to stop here for 20 minutes, here for 35 minutes, etc. So that was totally fine. And then once I got north of Gympie, I started using the ChargeFox stations, which were also great. I just downloaded the app, and yeah, I think even in Mackay, there's a ChargeFox station here, and it only costs 20 cents a kilowatt hour. So for my Model 3 that has a 75 kilowatt hour battery pack, you could fully charge it for $15.
$15, yeah, wow.
And that'll get you 460 to 500 Ks for $15. So it's even at a charging station, it's super cheap.
Yeah.
And then yeah, out in Clermont, I was just charging it at my brother's place with the cable, which overnight you get 120, 140 Ks overnight. So it was fine.
That's the sort of thing we're trying to demonstrate to a lot of people. You can literally just plug it in anywhere, getting permission, obviously, if you're in a public place or in a private place, but you can plug these cars in absolutely anywhere. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you're doing, going back to Clermont in the region that's obviously full of mining and resources, because mining companies, as you know, are transitioning to renewables, transitioning to electric vehicles because they see it makes good business sense, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, I've heard that a lot of mining operations are starting to install solar arrays and to use renewable energy, etc. as well. And it's probably just a purely financial decision now, because that's where the technology is. It's cheaper. It's becoming much cheaper than coal. So yeah, it's great to see, and all that stuff. Also, it just generates more and more conversation.
So let's talk a little bit about the climate crisis, Dan. You've been a climate activist for a few years now, you mentioned. Australia's been putting off its international climate obligations since Kyoto, since 1997. We're pretty clear on the Liberal Party's policies of obfuscation and sort of smoke and mirrors, but is the Labor Party any better?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jonathan. Like as an activist, you're always looking for ways to communicate your message, but also a big part of it is understanding the political landscape and what is driving decisions in Australia. Australia has the worst climate policy in the world, and now that we're seeing Joe Biden and the US indicating that they're going to move very rapidly on climate, Australia is almost isolated on our lack of our ambition to tackle the climate crisis and ramp up renewables and EVs. And I've been following this for many years now, and I think one of the big obstacles is that the major parties take donations from the fossil fuel industry, and that's the big problem for the Labor Party. The Labor Party takes donations from Santos, Woodside, Chevron, and a number of other oil and gas companies. Now, electric vehicles are a direct threat to the profits of the oil industry. So if you've got Chevron, Woodside, and Santos donating to the Labor Party, we call them donations, but really they're bribes. They want something in return for that money.
Right. So they're not doing it for charity. It's quid pro quo, isn't it?
Exactly. And what the EV revolution is a threat to these companies' profits. So Labor, the big problem that the Labor Party has is that they're saying that they're going to fight climate change on one hand, but then they're taking donations with the other hand from fossil fuel industry. So unless Labor can stop taking these donations from fossil fuel industry, I don't think they can be taken seriously.
Yeah. And a lot of business and a lot of sort of primary production and resources sector businesses want to transition, but you do need clear policy. You need policy certainty and leadership, don't you, to actually help the transition to renewables. I mean, no one's saying we're going to stop digging up coal and stop extracting gas tomorrow, but we do need to have a plan forward in this country, don't we, to actually transition?
That's right. My brother's a coal miner. He works
Yeah.
at a coal mine in central Queensland, and we were interviewed for 7:30 report, which aired a couple
Mm.
nights ago, and my brother and his friends, generally the younger generation that he works with, they want to see a plan. They want to see what comes next, because they understand that the coal industry is not sustainable. And so my brother works for a coal mine because he needs to
Mm.
support his family.
Yep.
But if he had an alternative, he would take it, because he gets it. So I think that when you have people like Matt Canavan from the Nationals, or Joel Fitzgibbon from the Labor Party, saying that they are supporting coal workers by supporting the coal industry, that is a complete lie. They are not. Joel Fitzgibbon is not working in the interests of coal miners. If he
Mm.
was, he would be advocating for massive investment into clean technologies in the regions, in the Hunter Valley and in central Queensland. He would be advocating for ramping up manufacturing of batteries, or
Yep.
refining of the minerals that go into batteries. But he's not. And the reason that he's not is because Joel Fitzgibbon does not represent coal miners. He
Yep.
represents the billionaires who own the coal mines.
Yep.
That's the difference. And the coal miners are being used as a political pawn in this game.
And that's the irony. All this talk from some of these politicians about saving coal mining jobs and gas jobs, they're not actually thinking about the workers, because it's the workers like your brother who are risking their lives and their health to actually dig up these materials for us and for the world. And no one is actually thinking about their health and their future, are they?
Exactly. If Joel Fitzgibbon actually cared about the coal workers, the people who work in this industry, he would be doing everything in his power to ensure that they had sustainable clean tech jobs to go
Yes.
to
Yes.
as the coal industry phases out.
It's really frustrating because I see tweets from both Fitzgibbon and Canavan about how beautiful it is flying into their electorates where they see coal mines and that sort of thing. And yet, I think there was a report on 7:30 a few months ago about the Hunter Valley and the health effects, with numerous doctors being interviewed about the thick coal dust that's blanketing these towns around these coal mines and the health implications of this fossil fuel.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible stuff. And we have to acknowledge and in a lot of ways thank poll workers for their hard work over the decades to get our society to where it is. But there are now alternatives. The technology is there. It's been there for a long time.
Yeah.
It just needs to be basically built and installed. There's no technology that needs to be developed. It needs to be deployed now.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the only thing that's holding it back is the established money and power that's in the fossil fuel industry, that's in Canberra.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the workers. The workers are keen to step into the new world.
Yep. Yep. I mean, we saw Keith Pitt, the resources minister, the other week. He couldn't even use the deadly B word, which was battery, in a Sky News interview. So there's not much hope from this current government. But we've seen in Germany in the 70s and 80s, the writing was on the wall, and they put the cash on the table to transition resources workers into clean technology, didn't they? And money is probably as cheap as it's ever going to be at the moment for the Australian government to use and to borrow. So what do you think we need to do in terms of investment here to start transitioning people out of these sectors?
Yeah, I think Germany is a fantastic example.
Mm.
I used to live in Germany. I was an
Yep.
exchange student there 20 years ago, and I was blown away driving along the autobahn and seeing wind farms. And at that stage, Germany had a policy of anyone who puts solar panels on their roof if they could sell it into the grid for 4 times what it would cost to buy it. So everyone was buying solar, and they really ramped it up early on. And they also worked with the coal miners in their coal region to transition, and it was a collaborative thing. There wasn't this climate war that we have here in Australia, where, you know, the media and the Liberal Party and the National Party have done everything they can to divide us, to drive a wedge between people who work in the fossil fuel industry and the rest of the country, to make us kind of attack each other. That's all been generated from vested interests. And I think we could learn a lot from Germany and how they've managed to transition their coal industry workers into new clean technology. And to answer your question, like, I think the best way to do it is to really sell the future. To say, so traditional activism is about saying, you know, stop. We need to stop doing this, and
Yeah.
that's really important. You know, I've got so much respect for people who are chaining themselves onto machinery
Yeah,
in
100%.
rainforest in Tasmania. I think that those people are heroes, and more people should do it. I'm also a big fan of Extinction Rebellion and the things that they've been doing in cities around Australia. When it comes to the regions, we have to get out there and talk to people and tell them about the incredible opportunities that present themselves with the clean tech revolution.
Yeah.
Because that has not been effectively communicated to people in the regions. And that's where, you know, doing things like taking electric cars to country towns and just letting people drive them, that's probably one of the best things you can possibly do to articulate how good the future is going to be.
Right. And this is the thing, I think so much conversation and media gets caught up in the big picture issues, which are obviously important. We need to focus on the local issues too. So things like the experience of an EV, understanding what you can achieve with solar on your own home, and also considering local emissions and things like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting thing is, with a lot of these regional towns, the only media that they get. So say for Queensland, I think 100% of the newspapers sold in Queensland are owned by News Corp. And if News Corp has been saying for 20 years that electric vehicles are garbage and they're no good, and putting out all this misinformation, then people aren't getting the facts. They're not getting the truth about EVs. So to counter that, all we've got really, you and I, we don't own massive media organizations. Well, hopefully one day EV Brief will be really massive.
Thanks,
but
Dan.
at the moment, we don't we don't have this huge media conglomerate to get our message out. So the only way we can do that is through grassroots word of mouth. So, you know, going out, you know, I've taken hundreds of people for a drive in my EV, and I know that in the coal miners that I've taken for a drive, I know that in their crib room chats when they go to work, they're talking about Tesla. They're talking about how amazing that ride was. They're sharing the videos. It's generating conversation at the grassroots level, and then that conversation, then it's like, oh, if these guys read an article that's kind of dissing EVs in the newspaper, then they'll be like, actually, that's bullshit. You know, I know I've experienced.
I've driven one. I've experienced. Yeah. And you've had is it 20 or 23 people in your web series now? So if you consider how many people they're talking to on a daily basis, you've potentially affected hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah, that's right. We're up to episode 21.
21.
It's only been going for about a month.
Yeah.
So yeah, ultimately, what I'd love to happen with this project is other EV owners to copy what I'm doing. That's really the big game. If tens or hundreds or 1,000 other EV owners literally just copy what I'm doing, take their friends and family, perhaps go out to the regions, talk to people, that's where how we'll really grow this thing exponentially.
Yeah, education is key. I think you're right. I know it's not quite the same as what you're doing, but whenever I'm plugged into a charger here in the city, I always answer questions when people come up to me. When I had a Kia Niro EV last week in the driveway, and every single person who walked past and saw the plug in the front of the car wanted to know about it and what was going on, and they were astounded that you can just plug a car into a regular 240-volt outlet. So it is the advocacy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have that same experience whenever
Yeah.
I'm at a charging station. You have people coming up, they're curious, they want to learn. I was outside Byron Bay on the way up, and I was at a charging station. It is a small town, and these two older guys came over and they were having a look around, and I said, "Oh, do you want to come for a drive?" And they were
Oh,
like,
good on
"Yeah."
you.
So we took them for a drive, and I let them both have a drive of it as well, and they were just beaming. They left absolutely loving it, and I know for sure, when they had a drink with their mates at the pub on that weekend, I'm sure they would have been talking about it.
Yeah.
Here last week in Mackay, episode 19, the guy's name's Reen. So I was driving down the main street of Mackay, 2 lanes, and this guy on a motorbike comes up beside me and is like looking in at the screen and kind of curious. And so I knocked the my Tesla into autonomous mode, and then I waved at him with both hands, and he gave me the thumbs up. So I wound the window down and I said, "Oh, do you want to come for a drive?" And we went around the corner, had a chat, and then we arranged to have a drive later that day.
That's awesome.
And he's a coal miner. He works as a boilermaker at a coal mine in the region. And yeah, his name's Reen. It's episode 19, and we had a great chat. And that just came from driving down the street and meeting a random person.
So everything you do is about the advocacy. And this is
it's full. It's basically where I'm at now is it's like total advocacy. So every opportunity is every discussion is an opportunity to talk about EVs, to talk about clean tech and the future.
Because this is bigger than Tesla, isn't it? There are so many manufacturers who are going towards a zero emissions model fleet and have committed to doing that by 2030, 2035. We need to push the boundaries on all our transportation and things like public transport as well. I think before we started recording, you mentioned studies in the US about emissions from school buses, and it's outrageous that school kids are having to breathe in particulate matter from diesel buses, isn't it, when there are alternatives?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and there was a study done in the US. I think they looked at over 20,000 school kids who ride these big yellow diesel buses to school, and they have on average a 6-point lower IQ than kids who aren't exposed to this stuff every day. No one's talking about this issue. The exposure to diesel particulate and carbon monoxide is making us all sicker and dumber. Like, our society is dumber and sicker because we're all breathing this stuff in every single day. And buses is another huge opportunity. It's low hanging fruit. Like China has had over 500,000 electric buses on the road for like 2 years now. And we've got politicians in New South Wales and in Victoria who are bragging about having a trial bus, like one trial bus or 2 trial buses.
Oh, it's Victoria. It's four in New South Wales.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that as well. I forget the minister's name who announced that. But when I saw that, I was like, come on. And the Victorian one, they announced a 3-year trial. I mean, what do you need a trial for? Let's ramp it up
just
now.
Do it.
Get these. Just do it. I live next door to in Melbourne. I'm like a block away from a bus depot.
Right.
They're all diesel buses. This disgusting black exhaust comes out of them. I walk out onto my balcony. You wipe your finger on your balcony, and it's just covered in black soot.
Oh, it's the same in the city of Sydney here.
Lungs.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, in New South Wales' defence, they have committed to electrifying the full 8,000 strong bus fleet, which is great. I sort of visited the depot at the beginning of the trial. It was really interesting to see what they were doing, and they were just obviously making sure that the proof of concept works with these electric buses, and that they do work for they're fit for purpose basically. And the trial showed that they're well and truly fit for purpose. You know, they're covering their routes with 35-40% of range left returning to the depot. You know, so range is not an issue with this technology, and they're even looking at renewables on site and batteries to power these buses off peak. So there's definitely a lot of potential there. But I think sort of linking it all back to what you're talking about before, just quickly, about regional areas and buses and things. It's a social equality and a sort of health issue, isn't it? Because it's the less wealthy, it's the marginalized communities, whether it's here or the US, who are affected by pollution, isn't it? They're the ones who have to work in coal mines. They're the ones who have to catch the buses to school. They don't have air filtration. They don't have private transport. So we need to move to clean energy to actually create an equal society, don't we?
Absolutely. That's really well said, Jonathan. I agree with that
A bit
100%. Like
long-winded, sorry,
it's,
but you get what I'm saying.
oh, totally. It is absolutely an equality issue. Like people don't have a choice as to the quality of air that's in their community.
Yeah.
And if they're living next to a major road in a city, then they're being exposed to harmful levels of diesel particulate, and that's not right. And if there was no other alternative, then perhaps you could somehow justify it. But there is an alternative. We know that the technology has been there for a long time, and we have to, especially on things like the public transport and buses, we have to keep the pressure on our state governments to roll out electric buses as fast as possible, because they're going to resist that. Because if you think about the contracts for supplying diesel for public transport must be massive. There must be billions of dollars worth of diesel contracts from private companies supplying diesel to even public transport. So there are vested interests that don't want to see this transition take place. A few people at the top of the tree may make hundreds of millions or billions of dollars resisting it. We have to maintain the pressure and demand that our state governments accelerate the transition to electrified transport.
Yeah, because public transport and heavy vehicles, they're responsible for a huge proportion of emissions in Australia, aren't they? And I guess the electrification of commercial vehicles, that's a whole other story too that we should cover sometime. But I think it's in some ways it's good that public transport has been privatized to a degree in Australia, because the thing about electric vehicles is they mean lower operating costs for companies. And if you've got a company like Transit Systems that is concerned about its bottom line, EVs are making sense these days.
Yeah, absolutely. If it can be driven through the numbers like that, then that's fantastic. If it's driven economically, that's great. But at the same time, we have to really still articulate these massive health problems.
Of course.
Our society is just going to be so much better once we get off fossil fuels. I know in Norway, the air in Oslo today is 30% cleaner than what it was 10 years ago, because they've had a strong electric vehicle policy. And as a result, the Norwegian citizens are all benefiting from that policy. That they're benefiting with their health, cleaner air, and also more peaceful, quiet streets as well.
And Norway, like Australia, is a country that has been addicted to fossil fuels in the past, but they have actually strategically used that revenue to actually improve the society, haven't they, through their sovereign wealth funds? Whereas we're kind of letting our resources profits just go to the big multinationals.
Yeah, that's right. Norway, so the Norwegian government in the early 90s started taxing their oil industry at 78% of their profits. And they've been doing that for 30 years. And that has now built the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is worth around 1.3 trillion. It's the largest wealth fund in the world. And basically, in the 90s, the Norwegian people said, those are our resources. The companies are still getting 22% of the profits. So 22% of a lot is still a lot. Yeah. So those companies are still making a killing, and there's still, it hasn't, decimated the industry or anything, but it has enabled Norwegian people to take control of those industries so that the industry doesn't co-opt government, which is what has happened in Australia. Something like 70% of the profits in our resource industry end up going offshore. Fossil fuel industry has massive influence over the Australian government through lobbyists and all the rest of it. So it's a big problem that
I mean, it's basically it's criminal when you consider those numbers, isn't it? Even an additional 10 or 15% of that revenue kept by the Australian government for taxpayers could fund hospitals, up the wazoo, couldn't it?
Absolutely, and Kevin Rudd tried bringing in the resource tax, and what happened was the resource sector, well, it was mainly Gina Reinhardt and Andrew Forrest. They put millions of dollars into a fear campaign, an advertising fear campaign. They paid PR companies and advertising companies to scare people through these ads, and scare, basically told lies and scared people, saying that the tax would decimate the industry, and it just wasn't true. And again, Australian people have been sold a lie, and we've missed out on tens of billions of dollars in additional revenue.
So just to wrap things up today, Dan, what do you think the average Australian can do? The average person who's concerned about climate change, who wants to make a difference. Is it all about advocacy, where they see fit and where they can make change on a local level?
Yeah, I think there's so many different things that people can do. For me, I was interested in climate change for 20 years, but I didn't really get involved heavily until the last few years. So when I joined Extinction Rebellion and other climate advocacy groups, I all of a sudden found a lot of other people who wanted to see change as much as I did, and that was really empowering for me. And then I met a lot of people through the network and learned about a lot of other groups, etc. So I'd really encourage people to get involved in either their local climate change advocacy groups. Extinction Rebellion is a fantastic organization. You don't need to glue yourself or chain yourself to things. There's a lot of other things you can do in Extinction Rebellion that don't involve that. And beyond that, it's all about having conversations. I think electric vehicles is just a really fascinating space, because we are at the very beginning of an electric vehicle revolution. So those people out there who own EVs right now are some of the very first people in this revolution. It would be like owning a Model T Ford when they first came out.
Everyone was on horses.
Exactly. So that's how EV owners are today.
Yeah.
And the electric vehicle revolution, it will only happen once. And so the people at the beginning of it who can help drive it, literally drive it, I'll look back decades from now and I'll be, proud of the advocacy that I've done now, and hopefully a lot of other EV owners, can do the same and help us accelerate this change.
Well, you definitely should be proud of the work you've done, Dan. Well, look, thanks so much for your time today, and keep up the great work.
Great. Thanks very much, Jonathan. I really appreciate the chat.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap on our conversation with Daniel Bleakley. He is a passionate advocate for zero emissions transport and an activist in the best sense of the word. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Do make sure to check out Daniel's YouTube account, Coal Miners Driving Teslas. We'll have a link below, as well as a link to his Patreon. Please share this episode if you enjoyed it, and head over to evbrief.com to stay up to date with the latest EV news and reviews. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm Jonathan McFeed, and you've been listening to EV Brief.